Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This podcast is brought to you by BOCO Gear, a Boulder-based custom headwear company named after Boulder, Colorado. BOCO Gear was founded by Kay Martin and born out of her learnings during her more than 25-year career in the outdoor industry. If you've been running trail or ultra races for the last few years, there's a pretty high chance you own a BOCO hat or two. I have almost a dozen of the hats, and they're definitely my favorite headwear. And early in the pandemic, they even started producing high-quality face masks. Check them out at bocogear.com. That's BOCO gear.com. And there's a style for everyone. In this episode, you'll hear from BOCO's founder, Kay Martin, on her own evolution as an athlete and why she started the company. Welcome back. I have Kay Martin joining me on the podcast today. Kay, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Oh, and thanks so much for having me.
For sure. So first question is always a tough one. Who is Kay?
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, I'm a daughter, sister, mother, friend, fake athlete. And I would say I'm pretty loyal. And I think when you're a founder, it includes all those other things, passionate, driven. I used to tell people I was kind of a student of the industry, workaholic. And I guess although I live in Boulder, I'm a masshole by birth.
Yes, as discussed, East Coast, East Coast. So given that this is a running podcast, let me pick out one of the accolades you mentioned there, and we'll start from that. So you mentioned you're a fake athlete. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, and I went to the University of Michigan on a field hockey scholarship. And so for me, that it sounds great and all, but my sister actually got it for me because she was a phenomenal athlete. And I think they just figured like, wow, she's a McCarthy, so she must be good too. She plays the same sport. And I think they quickly realized that I was just more comic relief. I mean, I was decent and I played and, started and all that stuff, but I would still say she got both her walk-on scholarship and mine. So I'm one of six. You fought for everything. You're a competitor. And I was a decent competitor because, you did that to survive in a family of 4 boys and 1 other girl. But I never felt like I was this big, huge, accomplished athlete. I guess that's what I would say is I'm a fake athlete. And then even out here, I then moved to Boulder. Well, everybody here is really accomplished, right? So you kind of have to leave your ego at the door. And so when I tell people here I'm a runner or a triathlete, mine is to fit into my pants. Mine isn't to do, Leadville, and it isn't to finish Kona. Oh, shit. Sorry. So mine isn't, I run 3-4 times a week. I ride with people. I mountain bike. I love all sports. But at the end of the day, I'm not really in that circle. I'm kind of on the fringe.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be. I've spent a fair amount of time in Boulder, and I had a guy named Matt Daniels on the podcast. And one of the things that he talked about was Boulder Average is having a shoe sponsor. And he's like, right. I can run a 4-minute mile or sub 4-minute mile, but like 3 dudes on my street have done that too. So like, it's not that impressive.
Yeah. I think if you're here too, like I'm in the industry, Jonathan, and things have happened to me. Like, I show up for a swim just because I was going to do an Ironman to say I did one. And I have the latest tier wetsuit that a friend of mine, Ryan Dolan, gave me. And I'm like, oh my God, it's me. And, basically Michael Phelps out there with a new wetsuit. And it's like, who's the chubby girl in that brand new prototype, right? Like that's the way Boulder works, right? You got to be careful when you know people in the industry.
But it's fun though, right? It's like
super fun.
it's such a cool environment to be in a place where everybody cares so much about health and performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And it keeps you motivated, right? And it gets more people inspired. So I have a neighbor that never ran. She's like, I'm not a runner. And now she's part of our running group. And damn it, of course, she's running faster than all of us. So choose your friends wisely. Like I was trying to get the slowest person because for me, I feel like I'm invited because I'm bait here, right? Like, oh, I get you. I'm running at sunrise and sunset and I'm the slowest. I know what you're after.
You're recruiting in the wrong places then.
I know. I really, well, when I turned a certain age, it wasn't 30, but when I
For
turned a certain age, I kept saying, I'm going to do a race in the fattest state and anyone can come that's not in my age group because I just got a podium somehow. I just got to go to the fattest state, do the longest distance because I can outlast them all without my chubby fat, but I'm not going to win by speed. It's not going to be a speed race.
Nice. So you started your athletic career, your dual career of comedy and athletics in field hockey, is what it sounds
Right.
like. How did that evolve into running and endurance?
Um, well, I think the first memory I
Or
have,
did it?
I don't know if it did. I just have endurance. Well, you have to run in field hockey, sadly. And
Right.
I still say that running isn't my favorite sport, but I do it most often because it's easiest, right? Um, but I ran to get in shape for my sport, of course. And, it was distances or whatever. And then I had a lab partner actually at Michigan that was an endurance athlete. Is the first one I knew. It was, the 80s. And he was going to do Kona. And I would train with him. So I would run and he got me into cycling. And I just felt like, oh, that's a sport for me because it's not just running. I could swim. And in the early 80s, if you were a swimmer, you could actually win stuff because none of the skinny runners could swim. And so I think for me, running was just always has been a part of me kind of staying in shape and to do other things or, along the way. And I think as it turned to business, running is where I process. If I really have a decision to make, I'm super shitty if you have me an on the spot decision to make. I always make a bad one. And then my staff even knows 2 days later after I've done a run somewhere by myself, I'll come back with just kind of putting that more in play that it makes more sense to me. So I feel like running is my best friend. It's the place that I get more clarity, or if I've got something really stubborn that I'm working on, I noodle things through it.
Yeah, I love that. So
God,
in a
Jonathan, I'm so sorry.
in a previous life, I would run commute, and so I would have um, that same experience of like I'm thinking through what I'm going to talk to my coworkers about, first thing in the morning, and it's it's where I have the most of my ideas or the good ideas come from a run, which is tough when you have them and it's cold and you don't want to take your phone out to try and remember it. But such is life sometimes.
Right. Yeah, that's been, if you really think about it, super fascinating for me that I don't do it as much on my bike. I really kind of am out there on a run, figuring it out. And it could take a few days. It could take, a week or whatever, if it's a big, strategy that we got going on.
So you've been in the outdoor industry for, it looks like,
Be
25
careful.
years now.
Okay. All right. That's good.
I'm quoting an article I'm reading here, so I didn't do the math. So take it up with BOCOGear.com if there's an issue with my numbers here.
There you go.
But this article says after 25 years in the outdoor industry, Kay has picked up a thing or two about the business. You had worked in sales for a few big name brands, but you saw a missing piece in the apparel industry, specifically the headwear and hats and accessories for athletes. And so, where did that Did that idea come to you on a run, or was it something that you'd been thinking about for a while before founding BOCO?
Yeah, I mean, I had worked for a headwear company, one of the, and then promptly got fired for probably bad behavior or whatever, was going on at the time. But I, even for that brand, I had known that when I looked out onto the landscape of the headwear space in particular, it was the only one that hadn't gone forward. Shoes had moved forward, and smart fabrics had moved forward with gloves and apparel, but the headwear space was god awful. It was like this old man thing, and what started creeping in was particularly in that space, there wasn't like fashion coming into headwear, which I just found fascinating to me. And I kind of said at the beginning, I've always been a student of the industry. For any of the brands that I work for, Moving Comfort or Pearl Izumi, they were the top of their game. So they taught you there just, not to be a copycat, but to lead. And I felt like, oh my gosh, is this just really visible to me? And I bet it probably was on a run, because it took me a while to work through what the hole was, what the industry was needing, and what's the problem I could solve. And that's where I started getting really excited about it. And that probably was 6 months long of really taking some time and looking and being more aware of that particular focus. And one of the reasons that I chose headwear was it just seemed to me like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to say anything, but this is so obvious. Once it really came to me, it just was so obvious. And what I did learn in my long career was, inventory is a category killer. And for me, I was trying to think up a way to have a brand that didn't have inventory. I had no money, I'd just been fired, and custom was ramping up in all areas. And I kept saying, wow, if I could get a quick turn, small batch, customized headwear with more forward looking styles, then I really felt like I was on the verge of something. And that didn't happen alone. Like, I live in Boulder. So at the time, people were running in trucker hats that were just regular cotton trucker hats or foam trucker hats. And a couple of the big athletes here had reached out to me because they had heard I started a headwear business, and were like, will you just make one for me? Because, no one will make one for me. And my sponsor wants me to wear some dorky hat. And we then originated the technical trucker hat, which is, was just a pivotal time for BOCO for sure, but also just started to flood through the industry. And it's a hat that can be washed and is more technical in nature. It can be customized. You can make one, you can make 25 of them. But it wasn't like slapping a logo on a cotton dum-dum hat. So it kind of just automatically just moved this whole industry to looking at headwear like, oh yeah, that is important to me. It's great for branding. It, it gets you out there saying who you are, with whether you're wearing a flat bill, a curved bill, something you can scrunch up in your pocket. So it really started people focusing a little bit more on headwear instead of, like I said, the dorky old man hats that were there. And it wasn't long ago. It's, 9 years.
I love that. And I've got like a dozen of them, between the Broken Arrow branding or the Grand Canyon branding. It's like, it's an extension of personality. It's like, you see where you've been, you see what is important to you, just like on a t-shirt or anything else. So I think that's super cool. What was the first thing you did when you decided, this is what I'm doing?
The first thing I did, well, one of the first things I did was just connect with everybody that I could, right? So I'm seasoned. I've been around the industry. I'm a female in a male-dominated industry. People had known me, and they had known I'd gotten fired. So I did a lot of groveling and begging, which I think was helpful, because at some point I'm like, dude, I'm not asking for your shoe order. I'm not asking for your firstborn. I'm asking for your hat order. How hard can I screw that up? Right. So shame came into play, and I shamed a lot of people to get orders out of them if I couldn't, just use my friendship with them. And it was super humbling because, they knew I was struggling, but it was amazing how many people and what types of people and which people came out first to support, a little, brand of headwear. That was very, very humbling at a time when, you're just starting your business and you're new, and I can't tell you if it's going to be perfect.
Yeah, I think that like taking the risk is a fun and exciting and challenging first step. You mentioned you are a female in a male dominated industry. Did you have any doubt, or was it always like, this is what I'm going to do and nobody's going to stand in my way?
Well, I mean, I think if I were younger and I didn't have the experience I had, it might have felt a little bit more risky. I felt like, okay, if I fail at this, let me give it 6 months or a year, whatever I could figure out my savings could afford. And then, I'll go on from there. And at the same time, I didn't do this full time. I was working, I kind of begged Belega for a job, and they were kind enough to have me working with them. So I was kind of doing this part-time and on the side, and with their help and with some of their expertise too. So I was super fortunate that way that, I had a fallback kind of position. But I don't know. I think for me, it was, there was risk with that, but I had all this experience from working with different companies to not follow those same pitfalls. And if I stayed away from inventory and just did custom with direct to the factory, then I felt like, hey, they're paying for this in advance. It's custom. I get paid. I can pay the factory. It's a win-win for me with less risk. So I really did calculate the risk.
Yeah, I think the risk perspective is always. I work directly with our CEO, and he says all the time his job is to plan for and account for risk and reduce it as much as possible. And I think that's essentially business. Like, how do you succeed while lowering risk and increasing reward? So I think the low or no inventory model is one of the best ways to do it. I work for a company that has no physical product, and the payment structure is like plus 30 to 90 days after a transaction occurs from the customer. It wasn't intended that way, but it's an extreme advantage that that a company can have versus shoes, where you buy it all up front and then you need to sell it one by one by one.
Right. And I think the female side of that was, I mean, I always felt it was an advantage. I was always in apparel. So if I'm sitting, I'm typically talking to a female buyer, and I always felt like it's easier for me to say, oh, that's super cute, than if you guys try and say it and we know it's butt ugly, right? Like, right. I might take the salesman in the room, but I'm like, you are not allowed to speak about like how something looks. Got it? Yep. Right? Like, what do you know? Right. And not that I'm some fashionista, but it just came with the territory. And now it's really nice to see, because in the industry, there's so many women that hold those, those spots. So we're kind of talking to our peers about it.
For sure. What advice do you have for other women who might want to get started in the outdoor space?
Started from the very beginning, because I always say, it was much easier for me to just take a job, try and get a job within a brand and reach out to other females at that company, because I think most of us really want to help other women and bring more diversity into the culture. And it's not just women. I mean, if you knew anyone at the business, I mean, this industry is such that I'll help anyone that comes to me. And it's just one of those things that we've all tried to do is like, I love this industry. I love everything about it. I mix, what I'm able to do every day with what I love to do every day. And all of us are the same type of people, right? We have our assholes and we know who they are, but they may not know, but we all know. It's a small enough
and they don't last.
They don't last. They don't, and that's good. And that's the way it is. But there's just if you're a runner and you're meeting at groups, just work that network. And I tell my kids that is you just got to network and gain more people.
Totally. I think that, that's how I got my job. That's how I've seen many other people get jobs that they love in the industry, or at companies that, some people might dream of working at. And it happens at those group runs, and it happens, through Instagram and, all these ways that we can be connected now. And it's super cool to see like friends hiring friends and friends working together. And it's just like you said, like you get to do for work what you love to do for fun. I don't know that that's for everyone. I think that there are a lot of people that I had this conversation with my manager a few years ago, actually, and we were saying that a lot of people love endurance or their sport of choice because it's a way to separate work and play. And for a lot of people, the marriage of work and play is a wake-up call. And it's like this. Maybe I'm not putting this in as clear of a way that he was describing it, but I don't think that is for everyone, but for those who it does work for, it works really well.
Right. Yeah. And I love everything about it. It fits Boulder. It fits the lifestyle kind of that I grew up in and where my kids are growing up. So, they traveled with me, they went to events. They didn't always love it, but they understand that I may be giving up a few extra zeros. Well, maybe more than a few on a paycheck, but look at the lifestyle you get to do. You're bumping into athletes and they're helping you out, and you're going to cool events and you're hanging out with people that are like you. I don't know. It's pretty nice when, we're out there and we're at an event, we know each other.
For sure. So speaking of events, let's talk about 2020. How was 2020 for the brand?
Well, it was bumpy for sure. Like we were heading into 2020, like we always do. We deal with events, we deal with teams and clubs and brands, and that was humming right along. We were making everybody's headwear. We had tons in process, and then whatever that middle of March hit, and boy, it went to like hitting a stone wall, and we were headed, going 100 miles an hour. So there were a lot of tears shed in those first few days of woe is me, like, oh shit, and oh my gosh, like in a week we should have been doing a couple $100,000 of business. I remember looking down with my CFO on a Wednesday and there was $9,000 in the queue. And I just thought like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. And, it's all about me. So I'm like, woe is me and woe is me. And then you kind of just get to work. Like it magnifies like, oh my gosh, there are 20 families that we're supporting. And as a team came together and everybody knew they can all see the sales. But no one kind of knows what's going on. Events are shut down and retailers are shut down. And we just did a lot of work trying to figure out how long we could survive. And then it was how long could we survive even hibernated until this virus thing is over. So I would say we were in a coma for a couple weeks. And at the same time, the cities and towns were, if you remember at the time, they were looking for PPE. So they reached out to anyone that was a manufacturer, and the same with OAs located in in Boulder, and they're reaching out like, hey, can your factories make anything? And although we do have a factory in China, they were not shut down at all. So originally, we were just sending PPE to hospitals and first responders here that was N95s or KN95s, just as we can get them in. We were just as like a service while we were trying to figure out what's happening with our business. And then I don't know what happened, but light bulb went on that our factory has available fabric. They have all their employees, they're healthy and working. And we developed a mask right away. I would say, God, it might have taken us a week to develop a couple masks. And luckily for us, we have a woman on our staff who's just crazy, and she's a technical sewer, and she's my head of production. And she is just whipping up what this mask should be and fit like and feel like with the available fabrics and functionality that we already had. So we were super lucky in that we got to market really, really fast. And then again, it was a shitstorm. It was, there's no global logistics at all. There's no commercial planes traveling back and forth with China. The US president is hating China, so he is putting all sorts of duties and things in place that we can't even get masks out of China. So it was, 6 to 8 weeks of no sleep, lots of crying, swearing, things like that. And somehow we were able to get through that. This is a company that had never, ever missed an event, never been late on an order. And we were telling people, it's going to take 6 weeks because one box is in Memphis in the FedEx place, and one is in Alaska, 3 are in Japan. I mean, it was a nightmare. And I mean, these people are my friends, and I'm like calling Cliff Bar, like, I'm so sorry, Allison, but like, I have no idea where your 17 boxes are, right? And then at the same time, Jonathan, we have $1 million out from one customer that owes us money. I mean, believe me, there was so much stress, like a head would explode. Like there was all this headwear product in process, right? Because we're running into marathon season and triathlon season and ultra season. So every brand, team, club, whatever, had product on order, and retailers are like, hey, I just can't take it, right? We're shut down. We can't even open our doors. So when you're left holding the bag for, a lot of zeros, it was, there wasn't enough chocolate or margarita or straight tequila to solve that.
2020 was all about adapting as runners and also in every other aspect of life. As a sponsor of this episode, I'm proud to highlight BOCO Gear's face masks, which are a perfect complement to their hats and other headwear. Offering a double layer with a slot for a filter, these masks will help keep you and your community safer in these trying times. With dozens of styles available online, there's an option for everyone. Check them out at bocogear.com, and please wear a mask. The piece that you mentioned about innovation, though, is really interesting. So at some point in the summer, maybe, Mark Cuban, who I love as an entrepreneur and prolific tweeter himself, tweeted something along the lines of this pandemic is going to do two things for businesses. It's going to close a lot of them, and it's going to force others to think of things and think in ways that they never would have before, and it's going to shoot them to the moon. And it's cool to see. Pressure makes diamonds, literally. This hyper competitive, hyper stress scenario is what causes average companies, and I hesitate to say it in this way because I don't want to sound crude, but it causes less creative companies to not figure out what to do, and it causes creative and forward-thinking, growth-focused companies to say, okay, here are the new variables, here is the new playbook, or here are the new rules. Let's make a whole new playbook. And you guys pivoted and made masks. And I have, I don't know, 20 masks, and the BOCO ones are like the best. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the podcast. It's like, I have tried the Under Armour one. It's pretty good also, but I've tried a lot of masks living in Boston here, and wanting to wear a mask because it's the right thing to do. And it's impressive that you went from selling hats and headwear. I guess that's considered headwear too. It's just face wear.
Yeah. Right.
To doing it that way. So what was the process like? I know you mentioned you have a team member who is really good at sewing and creative and whatnot. Where did the conversation happen when you guys decided, okay, this is what we're going to do?
Well, we predominantly use one factory in China, and I call him a brother from another mother. So I called him, early on and was like, hey, his name's Hyerton, and name doesn't make much sense to an American, but it's anyway. So I called him. I said, hey, we got to get on this mask thing. We got to make them. And he's like, oh no, because he is seeing like the regular blue dum-dum disposable masks. And then we were saying, no, can you make a mask for like more of a consumer mask? And then he really got on it. So he made some prototypes quickly, and then and sent them over. And then my technical sewer kind of ripped them apart and made them more for us. And the beauty of that was, the Asian population has worn masks all the time, as that's just part of, if they're going out and they're not feeling well or they want to keep people safe, that's just part of their culture. So he was super helpful in how the ear straps were supposed to be, and don't get these because it's not going to be comfortable. And they would the two of them would just go back and forth lightning fast with prototypes. And, we've taught him to be super picky with headwear, almost to a fault. And I think that experience, I left a lot in his hands to say, okay, make sure that the fabric's right, that, it's going to work with the CDC guidelines, which we were watching change every minute. And then we wanted to pocket for an additional filter, because that was coming on the scene pretty quickly. But at the time when we were developing, CDC hadn't even had the guidelines out yet. So we were on the fly for a good bit of time. And his suggestion was great. He's like, get it out there, right? It's good enough, get it out there. And we made a couple of adaptations early on, but pretty much what we came out with was rock solid. It fit all of us. It fit the majority of people. We ended up making, of course, against my will, because if you ask anyone, my other thing is like, no sizes, because how beautiful is your company when you have one size? But anyway.
Right.
So we ended up making a small, and then we ended up making, extra larges, and then an extra small for even smaller faces. But that first model was almost spot on. And then once we kind of stabilized, and that was maybe a month in, we knew we had to make one for exercise. We knew it. We had all the biggest brands we work with. So we quickly adapted one for running, and that's where we used the running community to really help us. They were all using and still using gaiters, which are fine. They tell the person that you're running toward, like, yes, I want to be safe and I want whatever, but they're really not safe at all, right? They don't do a whole lot. They're single ply. You can breathe right through them, but does make people that are coming toward you or that you're running with feel comfortable. And then the mask, we had to have comfortable. We had to have so that you could breathe, but it was still going to be, following the CDC guidelines. And that was kind of a brilliant move on their part to be able to do that and test it.
Yeah, it was super, super cool to see. And now, I have no idea what racing will look like, but, maybe at some point, it's in your swag bag, or it's in your, you have everybody with the same t-shirt. Now you have everybody with the same mask. What a world we're in these days. But yeah, I think that's super cool on the innovation side. The other piece that I was curious about related to the company is what was the biggest surprise, and let's go favorable surprise of 2020.
That the mask business totally usurped anything we could ever imagine. Yeah.
Just from a revenue and like
Yep.
everyone is buying this and it's not even a considered purchase.
Yeah, I feel like I'm walking around like, who is, we had 24,000 new customers. And Jonathan, we had no direct to consumer business. It was there because I had to do it, right? But we had very little direct to consumer business, and most of our business was was always focused on the athlete. And people would come to us for headwear, every once in a while from a bank or whatever, but the leader of that bank was a runner, right? So now we have a two-pronged business. We have one that these consumers are yelling at us and have no idea that we make headwear, right? They'll say like, my thing is 3 days late. And I'm like, well, USPS is shut down and I'm not Amazon, right? So it's super interesting to have consumers that have never taken a running step in their life knowing this BOCO brand for masks. It's weird. It's completely weird. So it's favorable because it's a huge opportunity for us to educate them and maybe follow them. What else do they need? We've made, bags. We've brought in filters. We have to have lanyards now. I mean, I think back, in the early days of Camelback, and Camelback was one of those brands that all of a sudden they got military contracts, right? Because it made sense, and they're building a business that is totally not within this business. And I was listening to some industry things early on because all of us were tapped to make stuff for the medical industry, and it's very similar to me, almost like goosebumps when I started the company to say, "Oh my God, we do stuff so much better than the medical industry." I mean, you have outdoor research making, masks and shields and stuff for hospitals. How much of that's going to stay? It'll be interesting
Probably
to me.
a lot,
right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much waste
that's the
in
point.
medical right now. There's so much waste. What if we have these washable masks now, and Alteryx is making lab coats and things that you can wash, right? Like this industry might shake up the medical industry.
Totally. And I think that need drives innovation. And when the status quo doesn't work anymore and somebody comes along with a better, faster, cheaper, smarter way, there's never any, it wouldn't make sense to go back. Why would they go back? Right. Mm-hmm. So now you have, I find this fascinating. Now you have two lines of business, one that you never would have imagined
ever
possible, now you have 24,000 new customers who all have jobs, or many of them have jobs. They work for an employer. Maybe they love the branding or they love the ability to do branding. And now you've got 24,000 potential B2B customers, if that's an objective as well. And it's just like these things that are so unexpected, but if you hit a pivot and you use the pivot to adapt and grow, it puts you in this place that you might never have been in before. And I find this so fascinating in business, but also in life and just in general, that like sometimes these speed bumps and roadblocks are major opportunities in disguise.
Yeah. And it's so true. And just like there's one of these, someone smart told me once, like, when you're running a business, be super open, because it may not be, where you're, I'm Irish and stubborn, right? Like it's my way or the highway. And And I remember him just sitting in front of me saying, "Kay, I know you're thinking it's headwear, right?" Or whatever it was at the time, but it could be open to those other things. And I think it's super important because it's how we made it through, really. It
Right.
was like, we didn't have time to think. It just acted.
Right.
And, you know, we're up against promo companies offering $1 mask, but, you know, the city of Aurora or Boulder or Estes Park is coming out saying, but yours are better, right? And of course we're better. We're so much better suited to deal with the mainstream here because we do take the time to make these right, right? And how many times have we gotten an inquiry where it's like, just put, you know, my name on in the middle of the black mask? And our designers never do that, right? They sent back mountains or stream or water, and people are like, dear God, that's amazing, right? So you're teaching people like, oh my God, I don't have to just settle for some crappy mask, right? I can have like this cool design on it that really has a personality to it. So you're right. It's fascinating. This will be a business school type deal in the future for sure. And I find a lot of it was lucky, but you're right. It may have come from stress and being a competitor and all those things. And I'm super glad to be on this side of it because our speed to market was so fast that, you know, everybody and their brother is making masks now, but I can guarantee you no one sold as many as we have. And that's not being cocky. That's like, oh my God, we just got to it early and had some good luck. You know, Runner's World did an article. There were probably 7 other masks in there, Under Armour included, and every other mask was out of stock. We were not. So all the athletes tried us, right? It was like, that was lucky, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if it's luck or if it's timing or being in the right place with the right time with the right idea, which is probably how I would look at it, being in a similar situation. I'm super curious. A question I like to ask athletes, particularly Olympic athletes or high level athletes, is about their definition of success. So I'm curious to hear what you define success as.
And I think that's probably changed, right? You know, it used to be I had to, you know, run a division, be the president, you know, whatever. And I think now, because it's a private company, I want to be able to support the team that's been loyal to me. And I know their families, like they're my families. I've known their kids since they've been born, right? They've gone through marriage or divorce or whatever. We've all lived through that with them. And I feel like for me, if I can give back to the people that supported me along the way and have a successful business and, you know, be able to, I don't know, leave that to my kids, sell out, do whatever it needs to happen in time, I think, and leave just some part of give back. I think that's going to be successful for me. I think we've turned more philanthropic as we're older. I like to nurture people coming into the industry. I'm not always a great boss. I know that about myself, but I feel like if I can be a better boss than some of the bosses I had earlier on, that's successful for me.
Very cool. So it's more about the legacy and your impact versus tangible outcomes is a summary of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you get into this industry, I don't think it's ever about tangible outcomes, is it? Like,
Right.
you know, you have your house. I mean, people in Boulder have, and us included, I mean, we have whatever, 32 bikes in the basement. That's success, right?
That
Like
is
for
success. N
athletes.
plus one.
Like, hey, and I have, you know, the latest shoe covers. Like, you know, we're brand driven, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to be out on the street. I want to be able to make a healthy living and all that. But I think, you know, Jonathan, this is what I tell people that move from out east, and you'll get this, right? So when you live out east, it's where you went to school. Someone's always calculating, where
Right.
do you work, where do you live, where do you
Sizing
play?
you up.
They're sizing you up by the amount of money you have. When you move west, it's never it. It's about what you do for play is what defines you. I'm a runner. I'm a triathlete. I'm a whatever. No one gives a rat's ass where you work, because you work here so you can play.
I love that. I'm spending 2 months in Colorado, and I can't wait for those types of questions about what do you do for fun, because that's the best place to have the most fun. The reason I asked that question about a measure of success is because I started asking that question thinking that specifically to professional athletes, thinking that I want to win Olympic gold, or I want to XYZ. And 90% of people who I have asked this to have said something that's not tangible. So it's not, I want to run a 2 something marathon, or I want to break XYZ in the whatever event. It's I want to see how good I can get, or I want to continue to improve, or I want to build a foundation for this new team that I helped start, so that, the next generation can be better. And I think that this has a ton of overlap in business and life and sport, because when you're so single track focused on achieving a specific objective, hitting a sales goal, hitting a marathon goal, hitting a whatever goal, what happens when you hit it? Like, does your life end, and are you just bored from now until eternity? Like, how do you stay motivated? So I think that the motivation aspect, if you can understand your own motivation and understand how to keep the goalposts moving forward in a healthy way, so that you never actually get there, but you get closer every time, and you're driven by the we always talk about process versus outcome. You're driven by the process and the experience of getting better, or thriving in a high pressure situation where the options are failure, or a new normal and a new line of business, and whatever it might be. I think, like, getting to a place where that can be your answer is the recipe for success, and that is success, in my opinion.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's been interesting it's been a good learning experience for me personally, and I guess selfishly, to hear that over and over and over again from guests on this podcast. So thank you for I teed you up for that one, and I loved your answer.
Yeah, and then I'll hang up and say it was all about me. It's about greed and money and big houses, and she's lying. I don't know. The goalposts do move, and when you're first starting, yes, of course you want to beat my competitor that fired me. But if I didn't move the goalpost, then where would we be, right? I'd be looking in the rearview mirror. I think you have to look forward.
Yeah,
And
that's
now
no
it's
way
like
to
I
live.
see my kids in the business, and it's like, oh, that's so fun. I want them to have a better experience I had in these places, and I can help do that with the way that I'm running this business.
For sure. I think my last question is, what do you know now about the outdoor industry that you wished you knew when you started in it?
What do I know now? Oh gosh, I know everything now. I
How to
used
make
to tell,
masks?
right. I was always a product person, but I used to tell people that, or I used to think to myself, I stayed at companies a lot longer than I should have. That me personally, I would have done better, looking out and leaving and going to other places. I don't know if that's true anymore, but I used to feel like, wow, the people that started with me are CEOs and running companies well before I did. I didn't really attribute it to my gender, and I still don't. I just felt like, you know, for me, I would say network like crazy. I was always a good networker and I was in sales, so that was a little bit easier. But when someone's starting in the industry, I'm like, meet as many people as you can and don't stay in a job that you're not happy in, and continuously learn. So I will tell anyone that, like, once you stop putting bullets on that resume, it's time for you to go and learn from other people and do from other things. And I'm not trying to get everybody to exit their job, but if you're trying to forward your career and you're not happy where you are, I'd say it's time to go. And I think when I started in the industry, I was just so, I don't know, I was just so loyal that even if I was miserable, I was staying.
That makes sense. I actually do have one more question. And I'm curious about balance. How do you feel about balance? Do you think it's something that's worth striving for, or is it not something that you strive for?
The way I answer balance is, this is my balance. It's not my kids, it's not my family, but I find that I run a business. I live this business every minute of every day. There isn't a single waking moment that I'm not living this business. I live it. It's a passion of mine. Right. But I play hard and I laugh a lot, and I don't feel that it's not balanced. But I also get when, I'm not picking on bankers, but if you're a banker and you work 9 to 5 and then you go home and it's your family time, mine's all convoluted and mixed up, right? Like, I'm running with people in the morning, I'm doing this and that. And I feel it's a good balance. I don't feel it's everybody's lifestyle. Like, yeah. I think this industry, when you're in it, you're living the passion of like work and play. It's hard to say there's a balance to it, right? And I just got used to it. Sometimes I'm totally out of balance. And then when I need it, I get back in, but I'm rarely turned off. And we didn't get into this, but we're 100% virtual company. We always have been. So the hardest thing for us was turning off, and not me in particular, but I had to give people the ability to say, please don't answer that email. I'm just cleaning out my inbox and I know it's 1:30 in the morning, but I'm not asking you to answer it. Like, I literally have to have those conversations. And now people know, they just have to turn me off. But I'm not expecting an answer. I'm just cleaning up when because I screwed around for 6 hours or went to a ball game or something, right? So I think that was the hardest with virtual, was kind of teaching people that, yeah, I'm psycho crazy and I may have a great idea at 2 a.m., but it's not a mandate for you to get out of bed.
I totally agree. I lost total control of my inbox in the last few weeks and months, and I spent a Friday night cleaning it up because I knew that nobody would be replying to me. So I got it from like hundreds of messages I needed to reply to zero, and it was lovely. But then people on the other end were probably like, why is this dude sending emails on a Friday at 8 p.m.? But right. The other piece that might change your world is, I don't know if you've ever experienced the joys of Google scheduled emails. You can write an email and send it for Monday morning. And it's just a beautiful thing, because then it doesn't have the like, oh, she's working now, maybe I should reply. So I love that tool.
Right. I used to do that at a company I wasn't thrilled to be working at, and I'd go for a long bike ride, and those would go out every 20 minutes or so. But I won't admit to ever doing that in my own company.
That's amazing. It's right. Like, wow, yeah, she is busy all the time, but you were like, 80
wow,
miles.
She's a really hard worker. I am, but I'm calculated.
It's so beautiful out. But yeah. Well, very cool. This has been a pleasure. And thanks for sharing your experiences and your wisdom, and hopefully see you out there.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.